Canada's Prince of Pot.
We love marijuana here, and we think everybody should have it.
A marijuana business that's testing the tolerance of Vancouver police.
There's not a lot of attention paid to the actual users of marijuana.
An illegal industry that's pouring pot across the border into the United States. Next on Impact. A nation's pride. Impact. CNN and Time on special assignment. With Bernard Shaw in Washington, D.C. and Stephen Frazier in Atlanta. Impact, a collaboration of two of the world's leading news organizations, CNN and Time. From Washington, D.C., here's Bernard Shaw.
Welcome to Impact. We begin with a new and unlikely source of high-potency marijuana, Canada. Indoor pot production there is a spectacular growth industry. Nowhere is the boom greater than in British Columbia, where the crop is estimated at hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and much of that pot is pouring across the border into the United States. Impact correspondent Larry Lamont reports from Vancouver, where police tolerance is being tested by a flamboyant businessman considered Canada's Prince of Pot.
Dick, copy, we're rolling.
All right, everybody's ready.
Okay, let's go.
An afternoon drama in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Okay, I'll cover that window there. You're gonna knock first, eh? Vancouver police got a warrant. Down on the ground. Get down.
Stay down, keep your face
Okay, we got one warrant here.
Keep going.
Police believe marijuana is being grown in this house.
Stay where you are.
Vancouver police, we have a search warrant!
Raids like this are common here, an average of one every 3 days aimed at pot growers.
I have reasonable grounds to believe there's cannabis equipment used in the production of cannabis marijuana.
These young suspects are charged with growing marijuana. Maximum penalty under Canadian law, 7 years in prison. But the courts are lenient. Police say these young men likely will pay a small fine and do no more than spend the night in jail, even though they allegedly are part of a booming illegal industry. Pot is hot and getting hotter in BC, mainly because of the tolerance here from the courts and the citizens, and because there are plenty of places to do things secretly in this large province with a small population. But who in the United States would have thought the neighbor to the north would become a major supplier of high-grade marijuana? In fact, British Columbia has become the marijuana breadbasket of the western United States, mainly through thousands of sophisticated indoor growing operations like this one.
If you add CO2, you'll reach 2 pounds per 1,000-watt light.
And the man they call the Prince of Pot is one of the principal forces. He's activist and entrepreneur Mark Emery.
So, you're an American or Canadian? In Vancouver, you couldn't buy a pipe, you couldn't buy High Times magazine, you couldn't buy anything to do with marijuana in 1994. Now, we have a whole culture with hundreds of books, massive number of magazines, stores all across the country, marijuana cultivation reaching record harvests, and we take a lot of credit for that here at Hemp BC. We started this revolution in Canada.
What's this made of?
The Hemp BC store, owned by Emery, is headquarters for the revolution.
865 for change.
Penniless a few years ago, Emery has converted his passion for pot into a empire, selling marijuana paraphernalia, literature, and seeds.
Seeds from every continent in the world.
Even chemicals to help people pass drug tests. At his Cannabis Cafe, a new way to get high.
And that's THC vapor and water.
Customers inhale marijuana vapor produced by unique pipes while eating food containing hemp seeds and oil.
This is entirely hemp. This is hemp silk. It's just very fine.
Emery shows off his clothes, all made of hemp fiber from the marijuana plant. In the basement, the company custom builds equipment to grow marijuana indoors. All day, employees and customers openly and defiantly smoke marijuana. Outside Hemp BC, a policeman stops a motorist. but ignores what's going on inside.
This is a home. This is a safe haven. If people can't smoke marijuana in this facility, then really there's no dignity at all to this society that claims to be a democracy. This is a marijuana store.
It's really nice.
But it's not a secret underground operation where people sneak in the back way. Tens of thousands of customers walk into the front door every year from all over the world. This is a highly visible public downtown business.
We do $3 million in sales every year out of these units. We have 35 full-time employees, 40 employees all together. We have a $15,000 a week payroll, and we pay $30,000 a month to the government taxation.
No, you got the seed catalog yesterday?
Hi, it's the little grow shop. Mark speaking.
But it's also a business engaged in illegal activity, and everyone knows it.
What do you got here?
In front of customers and our camera, a wholesaler brings seeds smuggled in from Amsterdam, where the marijuana seed business is legal. This middleman makes more than $100,000 a year.
Okay, what's the bill? $2,100. Oh, geez. Are you sure you don't want stock in the company instead?
No. The quality of this marijuana is staggering. It really is.
Emery then marks up the seeds 300 to 400%. Some sell at 10 for $375.
And that fellow just spent $250 American money on only 20 seeds. And that's very typical, and the government collected $35 in taxation.
Emery claims to be the most prominent pot seed seller in the world. He's got envelopes full of hundreds of varieties of marijuana.
Every kind of known-name Jamaican indica, Jack Herer, Jolly Rancher, Master Kush. These seeds can produce a continent full of marijuana. Definitely, absolutely.
To promote the cause, Emery publishes a magazine, Cannabis Canada. And he operates his own website to advertise and sell seeds, with as many as 1 million hits a month.
Oh, I think everything here is against the law. It's illegal to sell these pipes. It's illegal to sell the books to how to grow marijuana. It's certainly illegal to sell equipment to help people grow marijuana. It may well be illegal to sell the seeds to grow marijuana. I would suspect I probably break several laws a day here. But my argument is merely that the law is simply wrong.
While mostly ignored by the law, Emery is an agitator who pushes the law to the limits.
Yeah, right. You're a cop? You think you can do anything?
In January of 1996, police raided Hemp BC and confiscated everything. Within days, the Prince of Pot was back in business.
And we feature every kind of pipe.
With no public outcry to shut him down, police allow him to continue, at least until his court date later this year.
We love marijuana here, and we think everybody should have it, and we're totally dedicated to making sure there's lots of hydroponic marijuana.
If we can compromise Mark Emery's behavior at this stage, we would do so.
We talked about Mark Emery's pot business with the head of Vancouver's drug squad, Sergeant Koos Dijkstra. Yeah, why not close him down?
Do you perceive it as a big enough problem for us to close it down when people are being knife murdered and mugged? We haven't ignored it. We are paying attention to it. It's not on the front burner in view of property crime and person crime that's going on in Vancouver. Yeah, the girl in the doorway is behaving kind of like she's just peeking like she may be sticking something in her arm.
On a swing down some of Vancouver's drug-laden streets, the 32-year police veteran said Emery is on the back burner because of the city's more deadly problems with heroin and cocaine. More than 300 people died last year.
It could be heroin, but it's probably crack. She's got more crack rocks in her hand, probably.
Dijkstra believes the war on drugs has been a failure and has even made the problem worse.
You'd have to be a real dolt to think that we're actually improving the situation, but you're never going to stop people from using psychoactives. And by doing so, all you're doing is building up a criminal empires. Al Capone and the boys got their start with prohibition of liquor.
The growers of marijuana say it can't be stopped because there will always be a demand.
I think BC pot has become the fave of the United States.
This entrepreneur invested $50,000 for gear. He expects an annual return of $200,000. If he were caught with these plants in the United States, he'd do a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years.
Easy money. It's easy money. I just see profit here. There's a lot of money to be made and the penalty's very low.
bud off this was the July centerfold in High Times.
This pot grower is so confident, his plants sit next to a swimming pool, a gathering place for lots of parties.
I generally feel there's a slightly more humanitarian government around here. It's not into putting people away for the rest of their life for their choice of herbs or what they put in their pipe.
On Vancouver streets, people smoke joints unafraid.
There's not a lot of attention paid to the actual users of marijuana. Here's the guy in charge of the area.
A department spokeswoman backs up Dykstra. She says police are less concerned with individual smokers than marijuana trafficking, and that arresting users clogs up the court system. It is an approach many in the U.S. would find surprising. Equally surprising, Coast Dykstra's opinion about the Prince of Pot.
Yeah, that's excellent.
He's obviously a very dedicated individual who believes in a cause and is fighting vociferously for that cause, and for that I commend him.
Down the road from Vancouver, U.S. Customs officials are fighting for the opposite cause along the Canadian border at Blaine, Washington. But they are losing. So much pot is pouring in, the U.S. has designated this a high-intensity drug trafficking area. The appropriate acronym, HIDA.
Hello, citizenship.
Dogs and agents look for marijuana in cars and trucks. They've found it in false fuel tanks, spare tires, door panels, even in bags on the back seat. From this highway in Canada, backpackers carrying up to 50 pounds of contraband easily walk through the bushes into the United States. It takes 30 seconds, and they double their money. A pound of good BC weed sells for about $2,000 in Canada, over $4,000 in the States.
I think the agents do feel very discouraged at times, knowing that we're seeing a very insignificant amount of what's really going on around us.
Any goods or merchandise coming into the country today?
The Customs Service and Border Patrol believe Canada should move toward the U.S. policy of zero tolerance about marijuana.
The overall attitude in Canada is probably much more lax than it is in the United States on marijuana.
Do you think the zero tolerance policy is working?
No, I don't think it is. Far more people are being arrested. You got thousands of people in jail for simple marijuana possession. I mean, it is ludicrous when rapists are being let go to make room for a guy who's possessing marijuana.
Mark Emery wanted to illustrate Vancouver's tolerance at an outdoor fireworks show.
How much more have we got?
Even Vancouver's open-mindedness goes only so far.
Use more sense, okay?
Police took Mark Emery's joint, but he didn't go to jail, didn't even get a ticket.
Well, that can happen too.
Left to enjoy the fireworks in a place where police and public believe the United States is worried far too much about personal use of marijuana.
Mark Emery expects to go to court sometime next year on marijuana trafficking charges. Impact will be right back.
Normally, they'd be arrested in minutes, but police turned a blind eye to thousands of people smoking cannabis as they marched through London calling for the decriminalisation of the drug. The event, hailed as the biggest pro-cannabis rally in the British capital since the 60s, was backed by celebrities including former Beatle Paul McCartney. Campaigners deny legalisation would lead to an increased use of harder drugs. Instead, they point to medical benefits such as relief from the symptoms of multiple sclerosis, cancer and AIDS. And they accuse the World Health Organization of suppressing evidence that cannabis is less harmful than tobacco or alcohol.
People were openly smoking cannabis on the streets of London today, despite police warnings that they risked arrest. They were marching through the capital, supporting calls for the drug to be decriminalised. A Labour MP told them most of his colleagues agreed with them.
More than 10,000 people snaked their way through central London in support of the decriminalisation march and rally. The organisers said it was a far greater turnout than they'd expected. At the head of the march, the editor of the Sunday newspaper, which had organised the demonstration. She said the message to the government was clear.
We keep getting 400 or 500 letters a week running into the office. They just keep coming from all walks of life, from police officers, from prison officers, from teachers, from doctors. It's not just confined to, as Downing Street tried to say at the beginning, a bunch of middle-aged hippies who wanted to smoke a joint. It's just not that.
The destination for the march was Trafalgar Square. Once there, the crowd heard from a number of speakers, including a woman who said cannabis was her only relief from the agony of multiple sclerosis.
I deserve the right to autonomy and liberty to feel comfortable and happy to ignore my disease if I found a way. The right to deal with my twitchy, pissy, clumsy body the best way I know how.
And a Labour MP defied his own party policy to call for the law on cannabis to be changed.
The majority of MPs were on your side according to a recent poll. Let them come out of their closets and realise that advocating decriminalisation is good for their majorities.
Despite the numbers attending today's rally and march, the Home Office is adamant that their drugs policy will not change. There will be no decriminalisation of cannabis. Despite the air being thick with cannabis smoke and hundreds of people smoking the illegal drug in front of police officers, there was only one arrest. David Bowden, Sky News.
Welcome to Sunday, this Sunday, the 29th of March. Culture and drugs this week. The Conservative Shadow Cabinet Member for Culture and Sport, Francis Maud, will join me to discuss the upsurge in soccer violence this World Cup year and to explain why the Tories are now having doubts about the national lottery which they launched. So, is it time to legalise it now? Drizzle didn't stop a larger than expected turnout for the first decriminalised cannabis march since the 1960s. I'll be speaking exclusively to Keith Hallowell, the top policeman, now appointed Britain's first ever drug czar.
Tonight's Eye on America investigates a little-known aspect of this country's laws, attitudes, and regulations about drugs. Case in point, U.S. farmers who want to switch cash crops from tobacco to hemp, used in clothing and other products. The problem? Growing hemp is banned because it's in the marijuana weed family. So is this reefer madness or wise policy? CBS's Cheryl Atkinson looked into it.
The Graves family has been farming this land, nestled in Kentucky horse country, since the Civil War.
It's got some green in it still.
Now Andy Graves is running the farm, and he's coming to grips with a new reality about the family's cash crop, tobacco.
It's such an unsure future at this particular day and time.
You think your future is not in tobacco?
Oh, I don't think so. No, I'm afraid I would be foolish to think that probably that there would be a great future in growing tobacco.
So Andy thinks his future is in another crop once grown on this land.
There it is.
A strong fiber called hemp that he thinks could help save the family farm.
Where did you get this?
It's from Ontario, Canada.
From Canada because it's illegal to grow hemp in the U.S. Hemp is in the cannabis family, a non-narcotic look-alike of its close cousin, marijuana. While the difference is clear to Andy Graves, he can't seem to convince the government.
We've run into a man named McCaffrey, who may be a good general, but he doesn't know beans about farming.
That would be General Barry McCaffrey, the nation's drug czar. He insists anyone who wants to grow hemp has a hidden agenda, to legalize pot.
It's just a subterfuge, to be honest, to make it impossible for law enforcement to maintain the laws of the United States against marijuana production.
In Kentucky, hemp harvest comes in August.
Ironically, the government once begged farmers to grow hemp, producing this film during World War II.
Bread for shoes for millions of American soldiers.
Andy's father, Jake Graves,
here I am weighing the hemp,
was one of the farmers who did his patriotic duty back then.
They desperately needed for the parachutes originally, because we did not have nylon and rayon at that time.
After the war, farmers turned to other crops and didn't object in the 1970s when the U.S. outlawed the growing of all cannabis, including non-narcotic hemp. But in the 90s, hemp is being rediscovered. It grows without pesticides, is biodegradable, and is used in everything from clothing to car parts. While Andy Graves fights for a piece of the action, British farmers are planting their 6th crop, firmly convinced that hemp is not a drug.
If you do try to smoke it, you would need a joint the size of a telegraph pole to get high on it.
But in the U.S., hemp can't seem to shake its negative image because the cause has been embraced by the movement to legalize pot, much to Andy Graves' dismay.
Are you the kind of guy that is looking to sort of legalize marijuana through the means of getting hemp grown?
Do I look like somebody that's doing that? Heavens, no.
To prove it, Graves is going to court. He's leading a group of Kentucky farmers suing the federal government to bring back the crop that was once their heritage. In Lexington, Kentucky, I'm Cheryl Atkinson for Eye on America.
And that's part of our world tonight. For the CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting. Thank you for joining us. Good night.